Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Henrique, index and ETF strategist with XP. We also have Jennie Lee, equity strategist with XP, to discuss the Brazilian equities marketplace, particularly the biotech space. Jennie, I'd like to start with you. Welcome to Trade Talks. And let's start with an overview of the Brazilian equities market. What are they heavily tilted towards?
All right, thank you, Jill, for having me. So first, when we think about Brazilian equities, I think we mainly think of the big names, Vale, Petrobras, Itaú. So these are mostly cyclical and value names. And when we look at the Ibovespa index, which is the main Brazilian index that we have here, about 30 to 40% of it are companies linked to commodities. And then we have another 1/4 companies that are financial companies. I think in a diversified portfolio, they deserve a role, especially nowadays when we think about commodity prices rising and global central banks hiking rates. But we're also missing some long-term structural growth names that are technology companies. Again, looking at the sector composition of the Bovespa index, less than 1% of its market cap are tech companies. So investors who invest in Brazil, especially those that invest exclusively in Brazil, I think they're missing some long-term growth opportunities that are in the tech space.
And Henrique, where do they lack exposure?
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having us, and glad to be here with Nasdaq friends. So I believe that on top of the less than 1% exposure to tech here in Brazil, as Jennie mentioned, particularly if we go towards the spectrum, what is tech, right? And tech is nowadays a blurred line. We can't classify techs by the traditional gig sectors. So we do see that the Brazilians, they do lack the ability to be exposed to the biotech space. And therefore, we believe that offering a US biotech exposure would be a smart way for addressing this and for avoiding the famous home bias equity here in Brazil, because most of them will be tilted towards investing in the Brazilian large stocks and the large cap equities here in Brazil. And as Jennie mentioned, they would be exposed more tilted towards commodities and financials and less tilted towards techs. So we see with very excitement the opportunity for offering Brazilians the exposure to the US biotech space.
So Jennie, what do you recommend to get exposure to the biotech sector?
So I think when we look at biotech, it is very hard to do stock picking. So there are a number of companies trying to come up with revolutionary products and solutions to certain problems that we have. And it's hard to know which one of them will succeed, right? They have to do the research, the development, and they have to go through approvals with the health authorities. Some of them may not succeed. So in our opinion, I think the easiest way for investors to get exposure to biotech, without having to keep tabs with what's going on and taking a close look at every single approval, every single research, and also not have too much risk in a concentrated name, is through a diversified vehicle like an ETF. So I think this way it helps investors to spread the risk a little bit. You may get some exposure in names that might not succeed or might have some negative news relative to what they're trying to do in terms of research and biotech, but you may also invest in names or get the opportunity to invest in names that are successful in what they're trying to do. So I think investing in a diversified vehicle gives you that opportunity.
And Henrique, to wrap up here, in addition to pandemic-related themes, what other trends are you watching in biotech?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Jill, and particularly because everyone is so focused on the vaccines nowadays. But I remember watching an amazing webcast with one of Nasdaq specialists, Mark Marex, and he was mentioning the innovations towards the Nasdaq Biotech Index, which we do replicate in a mutual fund feeder here in Brazil called Trend Biotech. And it's impressive how we could allow the Brazilian investors to get exposure in the secular theme other than vaccines, right? So when we're talking about biotech, we're not only talking about vaccination, we're talking about diagnosis, we're talking about gene therapy, we're talking about regenerative cells and all the other Star Trek technology that we couldn't envision in biotech going forward. So I think having exposure for this secular growth story is quite important, and especially giving other possibilities such as treating the cancer, treating Alzheimer's disease, and some diseases that were never properly dealt before with the traditional healthcare industry. Biotech would be able to address those and of course providing investors an amazing tailwind opportunity.
All right. We thank you both for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.